A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into his nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now a week later, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believe." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Happy feast day, everyone. Thank you. You know it's a red letter day when Sisters in white. I love St. Gregory the Great tells us that the doubting of Thomas helped our faith more than the faith of all the other apostles combined. Isn't that wonderful? It took me a while to figure this out. My grandmother would quote St. Thomas at every single Mass she attended. When I was little, we'd go to Mass, and she would, at the elevation of the host, I would just hear, and I remember asking her, "Grandma, what are you saying?" And she would always say, "Oh, I'm just praying, I'm just praying." Well, it took her hearing abilities to go down, and of course, you know, often when hearing goes down, the volume goes up, right? And so I remember saying Mass once, and I held up the host, and of course I heard the saintly woman go, "My Lord and my God." Of course, she thought no one else could hear her. I could. Not a bad thing to do at the elevation of Mass. So each of the 12 apostles has his own coat of arms. And St. Thomas's is a red shield with an upright spear and then a carpenter's square in front of it. You can kind of picture that. So we know that he was martyred by being stabbed to death. I have a theory. I think that when St. Thomas touched our Lord's heart in the upper room, it was there that he received the strength to be stabbed to death for Christ. Now, please God, most of us are not called to that kind of martyrdom, the martyrdom of blood. But we are called to give our lives to Christ in another way, day in and day out. Which is why I'm glad that the carpentry square is there. Right? Before our Lord called him, St. Thomas was a carpenter. Right? I like to think maybe he worked with St. Joseph on a project or two. And legend even tells us, you don't have to believe this, but I want to, so I'm going to. Legend tells us that when St. Thomas arrived in India, the first thing he did was build a little church, a little chapel with his own hands. So I guess the message of St. Thomas is this. Brothers and sisters, give your life to Christ, work hard, and build up the church.